is Richard. I'm actually transitioning out of big pharma into more the startup and biotechnology area at the moment. I'm going to talk about shaping statistical programming in an era of AI and MLs. It's actually the first time that I'm doing a presentation and don't wear a suit. And so I feel very dynamic and very startup. Whatever I say today can be used against me, but not against my former employer, my current employer, not against Verizion. I'm also as a disclaimer, I'm a strategic consultant for Verizion, but I will be speaking on my own account today. So let's dive into it. Data as a valuable resource. We know that clinical development is risky, it's expensive, and it just takes forever. Yeah? And now where the pressure is on, pharma industry is looking at gaps in their pipelines, yeah? We need to start rethinking how we do clinical development. Yeah? And this calls for a much more agile processing of data. And as my colleague Henning always says, we have to start making decisions when the science is done and not when the report is on the table. The availability of data and our ability to derive actions from this data will determine the success of clinical drug programs, drug development programs. Right? The extent of availability is increasing. Yeah? We're using clinical trial data. Now we're using real-world data, wearable data, all kinds of different sorts, operational data. It's all great, but if it's not available for you to make decisions at the moment you need to make these decisions, it's worthless. Right? So we need to start thinking about how can we use and manage data as a product. And of course, statistical programming plays an important role in this. We need to adapt to a changing environment. Yeah? For me, I'm a statistician. Yeah? For me, the randomized double-blind clinical trials will remain to be the major source of regulatory decision making. Yeah, so there's no way around it. I know there's a lot of discussion about hybrid sort of trials, using real-world data and decision making. That has an important role. I still think that randomized double-blind clinical trial will remain to be the top, so to say, the foundation of regulatory decisions. However, as we are moving forward, the availability of digital technologies, new technologies, will increase the speed. It will allow for faster, cheaper, and more patient-centric clinical trials. We need to adapt to this. And what I see happening is whole parts of the industry basically closing their eyes. How has statistical programming evolved? I started in the late 1980s, longer ago than I care to admit, actually. When I started, basically what we did, I worked for a CRO at the time in Reading, and what we did was we started basically by drawing up tables in WordPerfect, literally creating a table shell, and then I used SAS, univariate, for example, and then I would mark the numbers that someone would actually type in by hand in the particular tables. Right? And then it will come to my disk again, and I would QC that. Right? Of course, we've come a long way. Right? It's now much more automatic, but in principle, we are working very much the same way. Yeah, of course, we don't retype the numbers and do these kind of QCs, but the fact that we have like a table shell and we sort of fill that in automatically, it's still there. We haven't progressed that fast. And the question that I have is, can we utilize new technology, AI, MMLs, Gen AI, machine learning, to speed up what we're doing? To be honest, in my role as the head of a statistical function in oncology at Bayer, I had discussions with my superiors, and basically what they said, Richard, we have these standard things, right, in the beginning. What's that data? CDISC. Yeah, CDISC. We have that, right? That's standard. Yes, it is. And we have like table shells, right? So we're like standard tables, right, in oncology. We have. And we also have macros, right? Yeah, we have. So why do we need like 5 statistical programmers in a phase 3 trial running for 3 years? Why? Why isn't it done like that? It becomes a very difficult question to answer. Because they're right. There's so much more that we can do. And over time, look at the 20s and 2010s, right? Standardization and automation. I did a lot of that at Bayer. I worked with Bayer for 28 years in different functions. And one of the major discussions was around standardization automation. People loved it. When I came with ideas, they said, oh yeah, that's brilliant. So we can really be very fast and very efficient and very quick. That's fantastic. Let's do that, but not in my trial, because my trial is really special, and we need to, make sure that we, acknowledge the science behind what we're doing. So yeah, let's wait, because maybe the authorities don't like it either. So always the same discussion. We have to progress fast. Now, when I talk about AI and Gen AI, let's look at some definitions. What is AI? And Thomas already said it's been around for a long time. The FDA published a discussion paper on using artificial intelligence and machine learning in development of drug and biological products in 2023. I'm not going to read it, but basically AI is a part of computer science, statistics, and engineering, using algorithms to get stuff done. And then we have generative AI, Gen AI, MLs, right? And basically what it does is it is a part of artificial intelligence that creates new content from content that already existed before, right? Keep that in mind when we talk about AI and Gen AI. It has been around, so artificial intelligence has been around since 1953. That's a lot. I wasn't, just to make sure, I wasn't born at that date, right? 1997, around 1996, 1997, machine learning came up. Then there was a whole hype about deep learning, and now we have generative AI. So basically, it's all part of AI in a way. Pharmaceutical industry is lagging with respect to adaptation of these tools. I hear a lot when we talk about these things, yeah, but we are such a highly regulated, we have such a highly regulated environment. We have the FDA, and we have to take care of all these rules and the validation and stuff like that. And think about your privacy issues, right? So it's not that easy, and this is all true. But there are other industries that are very highly regulated. Banking. Yeah? I have an app on my phone, and I click it, and I could show you exactly my net worth today. The balance on my checking account, my savings account, what are my stocks worth, not like yesterday, right now. They are super highly regulated as well, and with all due respect, it's very private too, because I don't want you to log into some server and look at my data, thank you very much. Yeah? They managed to do that. Why can't we do this? We still look at data at a data cut like 5 months ago. Really? Think about that in terms of banking. So you know what your stocks were worth 5 months ago. Happy trading. Yeah. It's a very highly regulated industry as well. I think we need to learn a little bit from what are they doing. Whenever we speak about AI and transformation of pharmaceutical industry, We hear about adverse event identification, pharmacovigilance, diagnostics. Yeah, great things in diagnostics. You can actually detect certain types of breast cancer months before any medical doctor, anyone experienced in looking at these scans can see this too. It's a great advantage. Commercial operations are trying to figure out where you sell the most drugs. How are you going to do that? It's all there. But in clinical development, the area that we're working in, getting the drugs to the patient, getting an approval, very, very, very little. And if we see it, it's very tactical or opportunistic and not strategic. What do I mean with that? Tactical is you have specific tasks and you throw AI at it. Usually this is within a clinical trial. And is it useful? Absolutely. So, as an example, in oncology we need to write narratives. Yeah, lots of bad things happen to patients. We need to write that down and submit it to the authorities. It's a very lengthy, very expensive and very boring process. You just basically have to start typing. This patient was a 32-year-old male, started treatment then and then, and then this happened, right? You can automate that. Makes it a lot faster. Great. So you save a couple of weeks. We use too many programmers. So let's automate it, let's do something else. Let's make it quicker, let's make it cheaper. That works. It's all very operational. And yes, overall we can shave off some of the costs of our clinical trials. Yeah, by using fewer programmers, going to market a bit faster. If you manage to reduce the time that you need to write down your results and submit it to the authorities by a couple of weeks, that's a couple of weeks more on the market, a couple of weeks more that patients can benefit from innovative drugs. That's very tactical, that's very opportunistic. You have a problem, let's solve it. You have another problem, let's solve it too. And another problem, let's solve it too. Yeah? It doesn't change anything with respect to how you work. Start thinking, if you think about how are we going to reshape statistical programming, start to think more strategically. Think about not only one particular clinical trial, not one particular task, not one particular function, but the overall clinical development. Start in the beginning. What patients are you targeting? If you then have these patients, where can we find these patients? Yeah? The real world data part. Where can we find these patients? Set up your phase 1 trial. What do you want to prove in your phase 1? Depending on the outcome of your phase 1, what are you going to do next? Can we do that when the science is done? When you have your data, you make a decision and say, we go on to the next part, the phase 2 trial or perhaps an expansion phase. Can we move from phase 2 to phase 3 really quickly? In oncology, this is often the case. Right? Then you may shave off years of development time rather than weeks. And now we're really talking benefit. Yeah? But you have to start thinking strategically. You have to start thinking across functions. It's not about making sure that your statistical programming function gets faster and better. It's not that the statisticians write SAPs much faster. It's not that the medical writer writes the report much faster. It's the whole development chain that needs to change. There's several examples of using AI in the clinical development space, but again, these are very tactical, like clinical coding. This more or less automatic. Using developing drug labels using LLMs, writing patient narratives for clinical study report. What Frisian is doing. Right? Supporting QC, make sure that programs are reusable, make this more efficient. Right? Using real-world data on patient populations. What patient population is this drug for? Where can we find that patient population? And integrate digital patients. There's a lot of discussion there as well, like synthetic controls. I'm sure you heard about that. Right? I think synthetic control is great. I don't believe in complete synthetic control groups. I think it's great to augment synthetic patients to your clinical trial to increase the power of a study. So, AI and LLMs are automating many aspects of statistical programming. Coming back to the statistical programming, we need to start thinking, how can it change the QC? We do double programming. I tried to find out what other industry does double programming. I have not come across one. Yeah, so think about that. Think about the time you need for double programming. Right? The tables, listings, and figures. Right? Obvious. Report generation also. If you use AI and LLMs, or Gen AI, it will reduce human error and it will increase efficiency. That does not mean that the statistical programmers are not needed anymore. There is a Gartner report, 2023. They found that 22% of the employees in statistical programming, pharma, expect AI to replace their job in the next 5 years. I think that's an underestimation. However, it will create new jobs as well. Yeah? It actually allows us to refocus on what matters most. What I have experienced, not only at Bayer, but also in other companies, I think it's quite universal, is that statistical programming departments, functions, are very operational, very responsive. You've got to do this, you do it. Next table, next table. Another figure, another figure. Something for a publication, something for a publication. Yeah? I think that if a statistical programmer starts thinking more in the direction of how can I really add value to the company, to a clinical program, then we are moving forward in a direction that I think is beneficial for the respective functions. What are the challenges? I wrote down 5. I'm pretty sure there are loads more. One is algorithmic bias. Right? You want to make sure that your AI does not perpetuate existing biases. Transparency and explainability. AI is very often like a black box. You do something inside, you put something in and you get something out, and in the middle something happens. Try explaining that algorithm to the FDA. Enjoy your life. It's not going to work. And rightly so. Right? So we have to start thinking about explainable AI. You know, how can AI support your decision processes? Having said that, I think also we're going overboard with the validation and explainability. As an example, I discussed this morning with someone. Think about narratives. So we have AI methods to write narratives. How does this work in real life? Some poor person as a CRO in general, starts typing up a report. And then an experienced medical writer in general, they will look at the data, they look at the report and check it. Okay, now instead of that first person, we use a computer to do that. Why are we so worried about the validation? Do we really think that a computer is worse than a human being when just retyping numbers? I think we need to also relax a little bit. Data privacy and security, obvious problem. I'm not going to talk about that. Autonomy and human oversight. It is still important that we have human oversight. I think that a time where we don't need a human in the loop is far away. We need people with domain knowledge, and I'll explain that a little bit later in the talk. And then equitable access and distribution of benefits. Right? There's a lot of pull at the moment to make sure that you have patient diversity in your trials. Now, that AI, most of the AI algorithms, they live off what is there. Right? And what is there is not necessarily related to equitable access and distribution of benefits. Right? If you are a white male, right, the chances of you enrolling in an appropriate clinical trial are much higher than if you are one of the minority patients, right? And you have to take that into account when you think about working with AI. Regulatory compliance, right? There's a huge discussion, of course, when people say, listen, can we do this? And what does the FDA think and what does the EMA think? Well, I don't know what they think. I don't work for them. But there are some guidances already. And I think that the EMA and the FDA are much more open to new technologies than big pharma, small pharma tends to think. So you want to start thinking about a strategic integration of technology and expertise in your statistical programming functions. You have to combine the technology with human expertise. And again, I will give an example right after the slide. Start thinking about training programs for personnel on AI. People have to get comfortable. I don't know, how many of you have tried working with Gen AI, ChatGPT or Copilot? Anyone? I would think most of us, right? Does it work? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Right? It all depends on how you write the prompts. Well, get your people together and start thinking about how you write prompts, for example. Right? Train them also about the benefits of AI, but also the limitations and the risks of AI. So people have to be aware of that. Make sure that you have collaborative projects. Do POCs with other companies, smaller companies. Think about what can go next and how can we work this out. And that's one of the, it's for big pharma, one of the major obstacles. Someone comes up and says, I have this great idea. And then there are like 20 people in the company say, oh, this department's already doing that department's already doing that department's already doing that. Can we do a POC? Of course we can do a POC. Let's think about that for about 5 months and make sure that everyone is on board. And then we'll do a POC. If we want to move forward, we have to be faster in decision making. As a statistical function, own up to your expertise. I think for way too long, the statistical programming functions have been operational, tactical, and basically responding to demands. Instead of saying, hey, we are our function, this is what we want, this is what we need to be more efficient in the future. This is our path forward. Now, what is your strategy for the future? And develop hybrid workflows, right? The combination of technology and expertise. So I did one example, a quick example, where I asked ChatGPT, you need to analyze a clinical trial. The parameter is called Y. There are 2 groups in treat. Write a SAS program to perform a t-test. And then after I got the result, I said, now write our code to do the same. And this is what I got. Can you read it? It's perfect. It's basically, it gives you the proc t-test, and it will give you a t-test function in R. That works. Do we need programmers here? Well, not to write this code. But you need people with domain knowledge. You know what the big difference is here? This one and that function give different results. Why is that? Because SAS uses a student t-test. R, as a default, uses the Welch t-test, which accounts for different variabilities in the groups. If you don't know that, you're done. You have to be able to explain what programs are doing. I mean, that is important. This is just a stupid example, really stupid. Right. But things can go really south. I remember having a discussion with one of the statisticians who needed to do for the FDA, needed to do a certain analysis. And we were discussing this at work, and he says, I am pretty sure I need to go to R to do this because SAS can't do it. And then he called me up and said, you know what, I asked ChatGPT, write a SAS program to do this. And actually, you know, it was a PHREG, the proportional hazards regression function, Cox regression function. And with all the options to do exactly that analysis. And he said, wow. And I said, so how did it go? Because I didn't realize there were these options, honestly. But, you know, who am I, right? I didn't look it up, so all good. He said, well, I run it, it didn't work. So why? These options do not really exist. Yeah? So you still need people with domain knowledge. The future of statistical program. We see advancements in natural language processing. And we can actually use that. If you have an SAP, if you have a protocol, if you have an SAP, if you have the specifications, can we derive what we need to do from that language already? We see an increased use of AI in regulatory submissions. And we see an increase of use of AI and LLMs in statistical programming. You know, think about personalized medicine. Making sure that from a huge amount of data that you have, you pick out the right patients who will actually benefit from the drug or potentially have less side effects if they're being treated. Real-world evidence, big thing. How can we incorporate real-world evidence, data that's not from clinical trials, in the clinical trial setting? There's a lot of work coming on there. There is a continuous impact of new technologies on statistical programming. I remember when I started my career, again, longer ago than I care to admit, but it was basically you made a decision on, say, a data management program. Medidata database, right? Medidata, whatever it was, right? And you stuck with that for years. Same with the programming language, SAS. And that was it. That's how you did it. There were some other exotic things, but you never used that, right? Now, this goes a lot faster. Things that are really good today may not be so good anymore in 2 years' time. So we have to start rethinking our processes also. How can we adapt? How can we work? How can we also standardize and automate without sacrificing the need for good science? We need to rethink everything, and that becomes much more the norm than the exception. So, actionable insights become a strategic rather than a reactive function. I think I said this many times. You have to invest in training and development. You have to foster a culture of innovation, and that includes short decision processes. And ensure close connection with other development functions, especially a statistical programming function. You do not exist on an island all by yourself. You have the clinicians, you have the medical affairs functions, you have the statisticians, you have the data managers. Make sure that you keep everyone in the loop. Help them understand what you need, but also offer them to help with whatever they need to make a decision. Because in the end, we serve two purposes. One is we have to enable the regulator to make a decision about our drug. That's the first one, highly regulated path. The second one is we have to enable the company that we work for, the sponsor, to make a decision on what's next. That's not so regulated, right? And you have to be able to work these two streams more or less in parallel. Ensure domain knowledge. Honestly, I have seen so many programmers and so many output where you look at it and say, absolutely useless. Anyone familiar with PK analysis, pharmacokinetic analysis? Right? You see these curves, right? They go up and then down. Right? So basically two processes in non-compartment model. What you see is that, just to make sure that everything is caught, these concentrations are measured for a long time. And then the question is, make a figure. So what you see is, you see basically for like the first 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, you see an abundance of lines spiking up, spiking down, and then basically the rest of the figure is a straight line, because the drug is excreted from the body already. Absolutely useless. And the answer is, well, you asked us to do a figure about the concentration time. That's it. Start thinking with people that you work with. Be in the driver's seat when you address the challenges. You have specific needs and you are valuable to the community. Make sure that it's seen that way. And do not let others make decisions for you. Make sure that you are in the driver's seat. Be very focal about what you need and why you need it. And also, think economically. Because if you talk to your CEO, they don't worry about SAS and R and Python. They worry about how long does it take, what does it cost. Make sure that you speak that language as well. Stay informed about emerging trends and advancements in AI and LLMs. That speaks for itself. And make sure that you implement best practices and high standards. In my opinion, AI, machine learning, Gen AI have the potential to disrupt clinical drug development, but only if we manage to scale it appropriately according to the needs of our industry. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for attending and here for questions. Okay, so the question was, are there, or can I imagine ethical considerations where the use of AI would not be allowed or, yeah, exactly. I think that if you look at the clinical trial setting overall, a lot of clinical trials have been using patient populations that are quite privileged, right? Especially if you look at oncology, many of the trials are in the US, right? And so patients from certain backgrounds or even certain areas, or rural areas, they tend not to be represented in these populations. And I think that it would not prohibit the use of AI, but you have to be aware of that to make sure that you make the right decisions based on these AI. Sorry? You can correct for the bias, or you can decide that you have to get more data from other areas, right? Yeah. Yes. I cannot, well, can I imagine something that would really prohibit the use of it? And not really. But you have to be very aware of that. So I think that just letting AI loose and let it do its thing, so to say, that is the wrong thing to do. Yeah, the question is, to repeat for the audience online, the question is, do you still need to know statistical programming rather than just asking an LLM to do that for you? And yeah, exactly. So 2 things. One is, if you keep reusing what was done before, you're not progressing, right? So that is one thing. The second point is, I showed before how important it is to get domain knowledge. You have to know that R uses a different setting as SAS, for example, right? And I'm far away from the whole discussion open source versus commercial software, so I literally don't mind at all. Whatever you want, do it, right? It has to serve a certain purpose. You know, you have a certain problem to solve, you solve it as good as you can. But yes, I do think it's useful to still know how to code. But having said that, using LLMs, of course, makes it a lot faster, more efficient for me to code. Yeah, see it like that. See it like a helper. Yeah. Last question.
It's a quick one and a follow-up, I guess, to the last one. Where do you see us or anyone being able to get that kind of experience, to get that important domain knowledge, if so much of you know what we're doing is now, all that little kind of grunt work and small things that you do to build that knowledge is done by LLMs.
Okay, so the question is, how do you get domain knowledge? Make sure that you read the protocols. Make sure that you speak to the clinicians. Make sure that you have a conversation with the statistician and ask them a lot of why questions, right? It's a little bit like my kids did when they were small. Why? And after the third why, I would be lost most of the time. But and it's probably the same in pharma. But yes, speak with people. Ask them what they expect. If they don't like something, ask them why not. What could you have done to make it more useful? And keep that in mind next time. It's not that difficult. But you have to read. So if you work on a clinical trial, certain indication, make sure that you know some of the fundamentals of that indication, because it helps you make the right decisions.